Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp and I'm the Chief Digital Officer of DATAVERSITY. We would like to thank you for joining this DATAVERSITY webinar, AI You Can Trust, the critical role of governance and quality, sponsored today by Precisely. Just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. For questions, we will be collecting them via the Q&A. And if you'd like to chat with us or with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. And just a note, Zoom defaults the chat to send to just the panelists, but you may absolutely change that to network with everyone. To find the Q&A or the chat panels, you can click those icons found in the bottom middle of your screen. And as always, we will send a follow-up email within 2 business days containing links to the slides, the recording of the session, and any additional information requested throughout the webinar. Now, let me introduce to you our speakers for today, Gaston Hummel, Max Kanaska, and Anna Maria Badulescu. Gaston is the EMEA lead of strategic services at Precisely. He is a client-centric software and data professional with extensive experience across financial services, insurance, telecom, utilities, healthcare, and travel industries. His expertise spans pre-sales marketing, expertise, software development, sales enablement, product management, client success, and strategic services consulting. Gaston consistently demonstrates the ability to understand and simplify complex business issues, identifying optimal solutions by leveraging people, processes, and technologies in innovative and efficient ways that often exceed client expectations. Max is a senior value advisor at Precisely. He brings extensive experience as a senior DTM executive with expertise in strategic solutions selling and value management. Over the past 6 years, Max has held leadership roles in the value management function at Interos, a big data and AI supply chain risk analytics provider, and before that at Cogito, an AI-driven call center solutions with analytics leader. Earlier in his career, Max spent a decade in management and strategy consulting, leading digital transformation and data strategy projects. Anna Maria has over 20 years of software industry and data management domain experience. She currently leads Precisely AI Labs, a team of data scientists focused on innovation using artificial intelligence to solve emerging customer challenges with data integrity. Prior to her current role, Anna Maria has held various technical leadership roles, developing the big data and data integration family of products, as well as conducting research on emerging technologies and incubation of new product offerings. And with that, I will give the floor to Gaston to get today's webinar started. Gaston, hello and welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Precisely today. So today, data is the fuel for successful organizations. It's the foundation for data-driven decision-making, operational excellence, and compliance across your organization. Data-driven decision-making is the top priority for most businesses today, and your future success is going to depend even more on the availability of well-understood and trusted data. Successful data programs must balance current challenges while preparing for future opportunities. In other words, it's necessary to overcome today's data challenges, optimize data processing, and ensure regulatory compliance, while also supporting strategic and AI initiatives with trusted data. Clients who embrace innovation rely on trusted data as the foundation for their success across all these initiatives. Precisely is the leader in data integrity. We offer software, data, and strategic services that deliver accurate, consistent, and contextual data. That is data that empowers confident decisions, operational excellence, and compliance with regulations. Achieving trusted data is a complex and ongoing journey, but Precisely partners with its clients wherever they are on this journey with a complete set of capabilities and data strategy services to establish and maintain the availability and understanding and trust of your critical data. Our cloud-based data integrity suite accelerates your journey to trusted data, ensuring reliable decision-making, operational excellence, and regulatory compliance. It offers 7 interoperable SaaS services that work with your data wherever it resides, without requiring it to move from its current storage location. When we speak with organizations about their AI initiatives and that they have underway or that they have planned, commonly they are in one of these 5 areas. But the common thing that we see when organizations start with these AI initiatives is that they nearly all struggle and often fail, or the most common reason they fail is due to poor data quality or the unavailability of data to tune foundation models. Oftentimes, organizations have false confidence because they think because they've started loading all of their data into a central data lake or central data management system, that they're kind of poised for success with their AI initiatives. However, just because the data is in a central storage location doesn't say anything about its quality. And even if you have been doing measurements of the quality of your data in the central data lake, its completeness, its freshness, for example, have you been able to do any quality measurements around new dimensions, such as are there biases in the data? And if you're using a subset of your total data to train or tune a model, then how confident are you that this is representative of your total data? And even if your data is complete, you want to tune your AI model with a particular piece of personal data that you have for every customer, then how confident are you that you're actually allowed to use that piece of data to train an AI model? Under what circumstances did you capture that data? And what was the purpose, the usage purpose that was communicated to the customer when you captured that? Oftentimes, organizations underestimate integration challenges, particularly when it comes to trying to incorporate data from legacy mainframe systems, for example. And often the need for skilled talent is ignored as well. And when you see there's a bullet here, the first thing that springs to mind is the need for skilled data scientists and similar. However, under legislations and standards like the EU AI Act and ISO 42001, there's a need not just for data scientists, but for the whole organization to understand the AI use cases, how the organization is using AI, what are the limitations of these use cases, what are the metrics that we're not just measuring business outcomes by, but what are acceptable metrics in the area of bias, for example, when we go live with a new model. The other thing that's often missing with these experimental projects is having a good, robust, continuous improvement process. Organizations often expect immediate insights and therefore don't always have the right process in place to be able to continuously monitor error rates, issues with data quality, identify root causes, implement solutions, and continuously monitor the impacts of these improvements in data quality on your AI success. So what do we actually mean when we talk about AI data readiness? It essentially means capturing the necessary metadata about a whole range of different assets. Now, Precisely has been advising clients for many years on leading practices for their data governance programs, and many of these leading practices apply very much to AI projects as well. For example, it's always important to start off with the goals and the objectives feeding into these goals, and the metrics that are going to be used to measure the success of these objectives. But with AI projects, it's not just metrics around business outcomes, process improvements, for example, but also metrics around bias, for example, like what are the acceptable bandwidths for bias in your model before going live. We've always recommended to couple objectives with AI initiatives or data initiatives that describe what data is critical for achieving an objective and what criteria needs to be met by that data for it to be fit for purpose, and insights into how fit for purpose is the data today, what are issues with the data, what are the root causes, and being able to track in a transparent manner the solutions that get deployed to fix these root cause issues. Now, I'm not going to go into each of these assets types today, but under the AI Act, for example, you need to capture very specific information about your AI model too. You need to capture its capabilities, its limitations, the decision-making and approval process that the model went through before being deployed live. And depending on where you're located in the world, you need to classify your AI model into one of these classifications. Now, these classifications will then also dictate what additional metadata you need to capture for your model. For example, if it's a high-risk model, let's say something in the area of recruitment that could be discriminatory, if there's bias in there, then you need to have an incident register and a structured way of reporting discriminatory incidents to the local authorities. You need to be able to explain how the model behaves. And from a quality perspective, as I said earlier, it's not just about completeness, timeliness, accuracy, these traditional dimensions, but also, are you allowed to use the data you want to use to tune or train your model for this very purpose? Has your customer who gave you the data given you permission for that? And understanding what bias exists in your training data, in your model, and any post-processing that happens to the output of the model before being shared with a customer. If you're using a subset of your data to tune or train your model, you need to understand how representative that data is. And I won't go through all of these here, but understanding your validation data sets is, of course, critical to understand that your model is not hallucinating and it's not giving biased output. From a data governance perspective, responsibilities have always been critical, but there's this new responsibility now called human in the loop under the AI Act. Essentially, a business person who is the end responsible for the algorithmic output of your model. Now, I won't go into these in too much more detail now. I think we'll go straight on to how our solutions help. Now, one of our solutions is around data governance, and with our flexible meta model and our proven approach to data governance programs, we are able to advise on the necessary metadata that should be captured on all of these asset types for you to be able to deploy responsible AI in a transparent way that the whole organization understands the AI projects that are going on, what they're trying to achieve, and this continuous improvement process, how that looks. We work with many of the world's most successful brands. I've shown you a handful, I'm showing you a handful here. And that really concludes the introduction, and I look forward to the ongoing discussion today. Thank you.
Gaston, thank you so much for opening us up with this great introduction. And I am excited, y'all. I'm going to put myself on camera here for a minute. I'm very rarely on camera, so hello to everybody out there to facilitate a panel here discussion. I'm going to pin all y'all to the screen here. So I want to start by asking, what's the most common reason AI initiatives stall or underperform in the organizations you work with? Gaston, you talked about this briefly already, but what's the biggest reason?
It's really data quality and data availability issues. So even if organizations are doing their traditional data quality measurements across accuracy, completeness, freshness of their data, having insights into, well, how representative is the data we're using of our total data set, what biases exist in our data, and how can we make sure that these aren't taken over by our AI model. They're really some of the key oversights, if you like, in areas where AI projects fail to deliver the results that organizations hope to get from them.
Well, Anna Maria, yeah, I was going to say, as being part of the AI lab, what do you think? What do you see?
Yeah, so in addition to what Gaston said, of course, then there's the lack of governance. And when you look at these AI projects, it's not just about the data governance, but also the AI governance, right? So there's a few aspects that are coming with a flavor of AI into it. And Gaston touched a little bit on that as well. So you have to look holistically at the use case first. And you have to identify, is there a lack of clarity around the project's purpose or on how it ties to the concrete business goals? You have to look at the use case tolerance to risk or incorrect outputs, success criteria, cost. So some of these things come in general for governance, but some of them have a specific flavor for AI. And once you do that, then you go to the next level of governance for the data itself, where you look at some of the aspects that Gaston mentioned, along with data provenance, data usage, and then you have your metadata curation, and of course the privacy, legal, and compliance constraints.
Very nice. So Just a quick
So
follow.
if I can add something,
Yeah,
because
please,
I think
absolutely.
what Anna Maria actually mentioned in terms of the data privacy and protection, that reminded me of an experience I had with one of the asset managers I was working with. And essentially, the job there was to actually take their AI pilot and scale that to the enterprise. But very quickly, we ran into issues with the legal team because they were actually raising some concerns, and very valid concerns, by the way, with respect to data privacy and protection. And the point that I'm trying to make is that it should have been actually baked into the planning and the strategy of the engagement right from the get-go. And governance had really been an afterthought, and it should have been, I guess, integrated up front, to avoid delays and enable scalable success, right? So it goes back to, I think, what both Gaston and Anna Maria are saying around having a strong governance program in place. Obviously, data privacy and protection, just one of the dimensions, being a critical part of it.
Agreed. Very, very nice. Yeah, so what role should business stakeholders play in shaping data integrity strategies for AI? And how can data teams and business teams collaborate more effectively?
It's important that direction is given by the most senior leadership of the organization in terms of defining goals, the objectives that are going to be contributing to these goals. But as important as the objectives are really, for each objective, having very clear metrics defined. As I said earlier, it's not just about metrics around business outcomes, but also around bias, for example. So yeah, what are acceptable bandwidths for bias in an AI project that you're going to put live? And as well as defining these metrics, it's important to define your targets for these metrics so that the whole organization can come on board and understand what are we trying to achieve from a business standpoint, and what are we doing to be responsible about achieving this by assuring that we are not being biased beyond 1 or 2% maybe in our models. And maybe finally also having clear details and shared understanding of how those metrics are being calculated. So what formulas are going to be used to calculate these metrics, and how is the data going to be sourced for calculating those metrics? Again, just to have the whole organization on the same page and to be fully transparent.
And I would add, going back to so you have the leadership setting the goals, but then you go to the next level, you have your business stakeholders who are the ones who actually want to work the problem, right? And they're the one who truly understand what data is meaningful in their domain and what is relevant to the goals established earlier. And they can identify gaps in the data, ideally early in the process. They can look if there's any missing fields, any outdated fields, any stale data, and so on, and how that data capture the complexity of real world scenarios. And then you go to the data engineering team, who are responsible for implementing metrics that expose all those. So then the business stakeholders can then make a judgment. This is the data that I need, but it doesn't really have the metrics that I'm looking for. So establishing that platform to collaborate between those two, that's your solid foundation where you put the governance, you put the quality, and everybody's looking at it from different points of view. One is feeding into it, one is consuming them. And that's how you set that strong foundation, and then you build the AI system on top of that.
And just like echoing what Gaston earlier said, I think data governance and data quality should really be treated as core business responsibilities. Like, too often, the business basically delegates those responsibilities to the IT team or the data management team, and that's a mistake. We also need to simplify access for business teams and make them actually self-sufficient in driving the governance and the data stewardship activities, right? So the technology platform that you have in place for driving governance and quality should really enable and put the business in the driver's seat.
Very nice. Agreed. So how do you go about setting up a business case for a data readiness or governance effort tied to an AI program? Max, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, great question. And when you think about setting up a business case, especially with respect to governance and quality in the context of AI, obviously, I mean, there are a few different buckets that you can think of, right? So I'm like, obviously, like from a AI modeling, training, validation, deployment perspective, like the whole life cycle, a lot of time is spent in data munging, data wrangling, and really it comes down to how productive we can actually make the data scientist by cutting down that time, because you have high quality data access, right? So that's one part of it, obviously, like resource efficiencies. But really the true value comes from driving better business outcomes, right? So be it fraud, be it better customer engagement, prediction in some other manner that is driving some tangible business outcomes, or outcome rather. And then also, I think from a regulatory perspective, a big value bucket is actually related to internal audit, for example, or regulatory compliance and so on. So I'll give you a quick example of one of the insurance companies I was working with once, and they had an AI risk model in place. So the AI risk model basically was in charge of providing recommendations for fraud, underwriting fraud, essentially, right? So that was the job of the AI model that they wanted to build a business case around. And they had an existing model in place, but they really wanted to improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of that model by providing with some high quality insights related to their policies and customers. So it was all about actually building high quality governed data sets around their customer profiles, around their policy profiles. And preliminary testing had actually shown us the impact of driving the AI models accuracy in terms of recall and precision, because of all of that high quality data that we were actually pulling together. But what was critical was not the technical part of it. That was the easy part. The more difficult part was the whole governance and the quality process that we had to put in place to make sure that at the end of all of it, we had these high quality profiles that would then feed into that AI risk model, and then thus help them improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of that model. So very important for you to focus on having the right platform in place, so that you can actually, going back to the point that Anna was actually making around like the inputs, right? Do you have high quality inputs that are actually driving your AI models or not?
Interesting. Anna Maria or Gaston, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think Max gave a good example.
That's a very good example. Okay, so what misconceptions do business leaders often have about the state of their data when launching AI projects? Gaston, you want to kick us off for that?
Sure. I mean, the most common one is that having your data in some central data management system means that the data is going to be ready for your AI use case. But, as I said earlier, having it in this central location says nothing about its quality, about whether you're even allowed to use it for training or tuning an AI model. And it becomes, well, especially more complicated if you're trying to use personal data for the tuning of this AI model. What steps are you taking to assure the privacy of individuals once you've determined that you're actually allowed to use their data for tuning a model?
I have a few. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely have a few here. So it kind of follows on what Gaston is saying. Just the fact that you have the data, or just having large volumes of data, doesn't mean that you're ready for AI and the data is AI ready, right? And it turns out that oftentimes, if you have less data with high quality, then you can build better systems rather than a lot of data with low quality, because you just don't know what goes into the training and the whole AI system. Mm-hmm. Another one, I would say that leaders may assume that past data patterns will remain valid, but in fact, data changes and trends change, and data has to be continuously monitored to detect the drift. And when there is a drift, then you have to trigger a model update and perhaps another analysis and so on. So it's critical to keep the data fresh, keep bringing all sources, keep replicating from all the systems where the events happen. And another one, final one, is a lot of organizations assume that because they produce the data, because the data originates from their own systems, then it's got to be trusted. It means that we produced it, we can trust it, it's neutral, nobody tampered with it. But in practice, oftentimes there are biases inherent in that data. And they're simply in there because of how the data was collected. For instance, if you run a marketing campaign and it's only targeted to a certain geographic region, you're inherently biased to the geographic region. You cannot expand to the whole country. Or if you do it on a specific time of the year, again, you cannot extrapolate and make inferences for the entire year. Or if you do it for a targeted population, then you're missing the demographics for the rest of the population. So these are some of the misconceptions that are easy to slip in and then ruin the whole project.
Indeed. Max, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, like the only comment I would make is that a lot of times business leaders actually think that AI is magic, and you just like throw a bunch of data that you have access to from an enterprise perspective into this melting pot, or like this cauldron that we call AI, and everything will be fine and you will get magic will happen. It doesn't work like that, right? And business leaders need to understand, they need to be educated, right, rather, on the importance of making sure that you have high quality data that goes into the system. Only then you can produce high quality outputs. And it's really very, very simple.
Well, that keys up this next question just very appropriately. So how can organizations assess whether their data is truly AI ready? Are there specific criteria or red flags? Anna Maria, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, so on the governance side, an obvious red flag is missing data provenance. If a lack of understanding of where the data is coming from, how it was transformed, how it was collected, to the things that I was talking earlier, and also how fresh it is. That's a definite red flag right there. Another one, and we covered this already, but I'll say it again, is the lack of data classification in terms of privacy, legal and compliance risks. And here is where you think about your PII, personally identifiable information, in the context of the EU AI Act and other regulations. And then on the legal side, you think about data usage agreements. Just the fact that you own the data or you source the data, and sometimes even goes for open source, doesn't mean that you have the rights to use it to train AI systems or to use it in any way. And sometimes, so even if your data is ideal for your AI use case and you go ahead and use it and build it, in fact, it may turn out that you may not be able to use it in the first place. And if you have a solid data governance process in place, you're capturing those from the very beginning by covering that holistic use case, as I was speaking in the beginning. And then just to go a little bit adjacent to quality and governance, there's an other aspect that it doesn't always show as a red flag. It may show in the outcome of your AI systems that they're not performing the way we really want them. And so if you look a little bit closer, you find that even though you own the data and you did all the quality and you did all the governance, you're still missing something. And the something is additional attributes augmenting your data with external data sets. And that becomes critical to your AI system. And I'll give you an example to understand what I'm talking about. There's insurance companies, usually that's the best example. There's the real estate portfolio and they have to analyze the risk and exposure, right? And they do have address and they have property information for their buildings, for their parcels and whatnot. But there's still a whole lot more that you can add into that may not be in the realm of what they own. Things like, is my property in a flood zone? Is it in a wildfire zone? Is there any tornado risk? What is the elevation? It really matters, even if you know the location. Is it uphill or downhill? There's a different risk in between those two. What is the slope? Is there any risk of landslides? Is there greenery around it? Is tree damage and high winds? What is the distance to emergency services? Firehouse is the first one, fire hydrants. Local zoning and building codes, does it impact the cost of rebuilding? So all these bits and pieces, you can just think they're so obvious, yet it's very hard to see that they're missing because you're just looking at your data and yet the outcomes are not good. So looking a little bit outside of what you own and looking for that enrichment aspect, I think that's also, that truly then you have AI ready data.
Absolutely. Gaston, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, besides from a data quality perspective, meeting acceptable thresholds for things like accuracy, freshness, and completeness of your data. It's really important to be able to measure bias in your data, representativeness of your data if you're using a subset of your data. And what's also really important is not just doing these measurements against a single data set, not just against a set of training data or tuning data, but actually testing your model itself and any post-processing that happens to the output of the model. And moreover, instead of testing bias and representativeness in these different locations, also doing it from an end-to-end perspective, because just because there's no bias in your tuning data, if you're using your tuning data to tune or augment a foundation model, then who's to say that there's no bias in that foundation model? So you really need to check the end-to-end process to assure that you're doing AI or using AI in a responsible way.
Great. Max, anything you want to add?
No, not really, man. I think Gaston and Anna Maria covered it well, so yeah.
Indeed, they did. Well, let me bring this next question back to you then, Max. Can you share a specific example where poor data governance and or quality led to biased, incorrect, or risky AI results, and how was it resolved?
Yeah, great question. And I think I'll go back to what Anna Maria was saying earlier to one of the questions. And so essentially, governance operates on both the sides, right? So inputs as well as the outputs. So the example that I gave earlier was related to governance on the input side. But the example that I'll give you now is related to governance on the output side of things, right? So the output of the AI models and how important it is to actually govern that. So one of the largest banks in the world, I was working on an engagement for this particular bank. And essentially, this particular bank was actually using this AI model to help them with third-party risk or supply chain risk, in other words. And the model actually produced this score on a scale of 0 to 100 to designate or to measure the riskiness of doing business with a specific entity, right? So 0 being the most risky, 100 being the least risky, right? And great model. They had a very well-defined methodology and everything right in place. Unfortunately, the problem was with the interpretation of the scores. So as you can imagine, measuring the supply chain risk of a given entity and collapsing that down into a single score, it's a very difficult proposition, right? It's very difficult to do. So it's definitely useful, but really comes down to how do you actually take something like that and really actually deconstruct and drive the interpretability of the scores so that you can actually then make appropriate decisions. In other words, governance, right? It's all about actually making sure that you have a clear enterprise-wide understanding of how do you take the score, decompose it down into sub-factors, factors, attributes, understand the ranges, understand what they mean, and then basically drive meaningful action based on that, right? So that was precisely what we actually helped them with, build that framework in place and put that in place, governance in place, and that led to them being more successful, I guess, with using that model. So yeah.
Oh, very interesting. Anna Maria or Gaston, anything you want to add to that?
I think that was good.
Yeah, that's great. I love examples that show off that governance is more than regulatory requirements. So tell me, where should companies start if they want to improve trust in their AI outputs? Is it governance, quality, observability, or all of the above? Anna Maria, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so I would say all of them. It's not which one, it's all of them. And I think it's important to do that as the project is being defined, so from the beginning of defining it. And this doesn't have to be an overwhelming experience. The best way to start is start small. Select a use case that's clearly defined. It has clear goals. It has clear ROI. It has clear success criteria, and for which you think you have data with high confidence in terms of quality and governance. Establish success with that one project. And as you do that, you naturally are going to establish an initial iteration of the processes that go with it. So you're going to have a process and a tool for governance, for quality, and all these things that we discussed. And then you do it again. It won't be perfect from the first version, right? So then you do the second project, and then you iterate and improve. There's always improvement. It's never done. And we see that with a lot of our customers. There's always room for improvement, because on one hand, you have to deliver the project. On the other hand, you have to build these foundational processes. So there's always this balance and trade-off that is happening. So don't be intimidated. Do start with all of them. Don't let anything slip to the end, because then you're going to fail, or the cost is going to be much higher to go back and fix it. And do consider from the very beginning, build, iterate, and improve.
Indeed. Gaston or Max? Gaston?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, it's very important to have a good, proven and repeatable and structured process for continuously, well, improving the fitness of your data for your AI projects. So essentially, first of all, identifying what is going to be the critical data that you need to succeed in this AI project. What criteria is that data going to need to meet for it to be fit for purpose? Then actually do measurements, to see how fit for purpose is it currently, and then have the right improvement process in place whereby you identify the root cause issues of why it might not be as fit for purpose as you want it to be. And then again, a structured approach around getting agreement across the organization on the solution to fix those root cause issues, and just kind of get that flywheel moving of continuous improvement. And that's going to help, well, both from a compliance perspective as well as being able to rapidly iterate towards achieving the business outcomes that an organization wants to try to achieve from their AI projects.
Nice. Max, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think the only thing I would add is just echo what Anna Maria and Gaston have been saying around demonstrating small wins, because many times organizations become too, I guess, optimistic, and they become too expansive with their AI scope, and then it becomes a change management nightmare, right? So in order to actually be successful with that change management, you have to demonstrate quick wins to the business, to all the key stakeholders. Once you do that, then you can actually start adding more and more complexity to your initiative.
Indeed. So with regulations around AI and data privacy evolving quickly, what steps can organizations take now to future-proof their AI strategies? Gaston, you want to kick us off with that?
So what can really help is having a robust AI and data governance framework. And by, well, robust framework, I essentially mean that in my intro, when I had that Ferris wheel up of all the different assets that you should be capturing information about to ensure that your AI projects are responsible, compliant with legislation, and aligned with business goals. If you have the right framework for each of those assets, you only need to capture the information once, and then it can be shared across the other assets, and it's visible across, well, the whole organization. So what we often see when we come into an organization that hasn't got a robust data governance framework in place is that they're storing duplicate copies of information and policies and rules, summarizing what's in policies in 25 different Word documents, Excel documents across SharePoint all over the place. And then if there's a change in one measure or one requirement for a particular rule, you end up having to change it in all these different places. So no one knows where to go to look for, well, the source of truth. But if you're doing it with the right framework, and the right framework really means that you have the right relationships between all of those different asset types as well, then you can just go and change it in one location, and then it becomes visible, well, to everyone that is interested. And moreover, you can trigger notifications to people that, well, are interested in following a particular asset. So as well as having the right framework in place, as well as that helping you meet compliance requirements, it can really accelerate your AI projects as well. And moreover, also just democratizing them across the organization. So if you're working in a distributed manner and there's different experiments going on in different parts of the organization, it's great to have information about these experiments, the metrics, what's working, what's not working, democratized in a central manner, so that you're not reinventing the wheel and you can leverage what has worked elsewhere.
Precisely. Anna Maria or Max?
I would say, just to echo what Gaston mentioned, baking all of these into your processes very early on as you start, because it's much harder to bring them back later. And also, especially with privacy and legal and compliance, it's always better to spend the time up front to look at them, analyze them, and don't rush to deliver, because once the cat is out of the bag, it's much harder to bring it back in, especially when it comes to privacy. There may be reputation loss, there may be trust loss, and it's very hard to rebuild that once things are out. So as much as you want to deliver an AI project, you have to balance with the risks of going too fast.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think what I would say is that we should always be thinking about building a value story, right? So a lot of times I've noticed that as data professionals, we understand the value of data governance, right? And why it's important, like why to invest all of those resources in building governance and quality. But a lot of times, especially on the business side, and especially as you go higher up in the organization, people don't really understand what governance is all about and why it's important. So from a sponsorship perspective, like getting the executive support that you want, also from a change management perspective, always be thinking about how can you communicate the business value of your governance initiatives, right? Make it simple to understand, make it tangible. If you can quantify the value of governance, go for it. Otherwise, it's okay to actually just tell the story, right? But always be telling the story of why governance is important and what it can actually do in terms of driving specific business outcomes.
So important. Well, we've got a lot of great questions coming in from the community here, but before we get to that, I just want to ask for some key takeaways from everybody. Max, let's start with you. Key takeaways.
Yeah, so key takeaways, I would say governance and quality, don't make it an afterthought, right? Bake it actually right into the process all the way from the beginning. Make sure that you're building the value story, going back to the point I was making earlier on the executive support, sponsorship, change management, what have you, and keep on refining the story, right? As you make more and more progress, with your initiative, you will learn more, right? And that will actually help you refine that value story. But yeah, I think, again, governance and quality should be a key enabler of your program, not an afterthought.
Absolutely. Anna Maria.
It's hard to follow Max. He stole all my takeaways. That's exactly what I was going to say. No, but think about quality and governance. Again, we cannot stress it enough. Think of it as a foundation, and you build your AI projects on top of that. If you have a strong foundation, you can build strong projects. If your foundation has cracks in it, or if it's not there, then it's much harder to deliver. And doing it from day one, it's a bit counterintuitive, but it will make your AI projects go faster, because now you have a process and you can just go through it. And we see that inside in Precisely, and we see it with our customers too. Even though you have to follow all these processes and checks, it does make things go faster. And once you're there at the end, you're confident that you built the right thing, and you're confident on all the aspects that we discussed. Your confidence on legal, your confidence on privacy, your confidence on quality, your confidence that you know what you put into that AI system that you built.
Yeah. And Gaston.
I would stress the importance of implementing, operationalizing, and sharing this continuous improvement loop, and really democratizing that across the whole organization, because that will make everyone feel much more positive about the projects, because you're not going to get it right first time round, not from a business outcome perspective, and maybe not even from a bias or discriminatory perspective, but having that transparent process in place and knowing who's responsible, and the decision-making process for implementing solutions to essentially tweak that engine is just incredibly important for the success and the speed with which you can iterate, as well as demonstrate, compliance. It's a key requirement for things like the AI Act to be able to show, or how do you go about, reducing your error rates, for example, or dealing with instances where there's been discrimination.
Oh, all very important points. Thank you so much for this great discussion. Now we've got a lot of questions, like I said, coming in from the community here. And just to answer the most commonly asked questions, just a reminder, I will send a email by end of day Thursday with links to the slides, the recording of this presentation, and anything else requested. So diving in here, AI basically is a concept of using specialized algorithms, i.e. IT by definition. So what's the difference between AI governance and IT governance in your opinion? And why do we need some additional discipline in terms of such as AI governance?
So I can go, or
okay,
do you want to take
ahead,
it? Go. So I would mention a couple of things. First of all, there are specific regulation that only apply, or they're very targeted for AI, and EU AI Act is the first thing that comes to mind. You have to have governance around that targets and accounts for all the things that the Act calls for in terms of privacy and the risk of the use case and so on. And another thing that I can call right away, I mentioned earlier, is when you use AI system, there's an element of uncertainty. And so you have to govern that in a way that's a little bit different than your typical governance for the rest of the use cases. You have to understand the risk that you expose yourself with that uncertainty, especially now with the large language models and hallucinations and so on. And what does it mean to have incorrect output? Is it mission critical? Can you tolerate that? What does it mean? If it's a life-saving situation, you probably want to have a very deterministic system. Whereas if you make a recommendation for a marketing campaign, maybe it's okay to have an error here and there. So there are certain flavors, as I was saying in the beginning, that you build on top of what you have. If you have a very mature discipline, you build on top of that and add that bit of extra that's different for the AI.
I mean, what I'd add is, from my perspective, data governance done right basically means that you're capturing the necessary information about all of your critical assets, and more importantly, the relationship between all of these assets. So, for example, the AI Act says you need to document your develop, design, deploy process for an AI model. And of course, you can document that in Visio and store that away on SharePoint somewhere. But somewhere in that process, you're going to have a step where you're checking that the model is not hallucinating, there's not bias. And to do that, you're going to be using validation data. So what are you going to do? Are you then going to have links back to somewhere else on SharePoint where there's details of the validation data? And there are going to be links someplace else about the process for curating the validation data and improving it, or you're just going to have it all in one location. So you define everything once and it's related together. So you get this good overview of everything. And you get, you don't lose sight of the trees through the forest, so to speak.
Very nice. Max, anything you want to add?
I think when I think of IT governance, I think of things like Sarbanes-Oxley and COBIT and all of those things, right? I'm like, there's time-tested procedures and processes for that. AI governance is a lot more complex, based on, again, going back to what Anna Maria and Gaston have been saying, is because of it's not very clear exactly if you should trust the output of an LLM, if it is hallucinating, for example, and things like that, right? So there's a lot more complexity associated with AI governance, in short.
Perfect. So data quality issues have already existed for centuries. So why is data quality issues monitoring, measuring, and resolution very complex and difficult?
So yeah, data quality has existed forever. And that's one of the reasons why within precisely strategic services, we develop a set of leading practices to maximize the impact of your data programs on business outcomes. And one of the key issues with data quality over the centuries has been that very few people with business cloud have really cared. They've always thought, okay, it's a technical problem that technical people need to solve. But what really brings data quality to life is when you can demonstrate the impact that data quality is having on the performance of an AI model, or how trustworthy the data is in a critical dashboard that you're making key strategic decisions on, or how critical, or what is the critical data and how is its quality impacting a key business process. And what we found is that by helping organizations define the right criteria to identify what we call critical data elements, so most organizations would have 300 to 500 critical data elements. These are data elements that essentially drive 80 to 90% of, well, the business performance or business output. By having the right methodology to identify those and then addressing the quality of those, you can essentially speed up the time to value from your data governance initiatives by up to 5 times, is what we've been seeing.
Interesting.
I can chime in on that too. So there's bad news and good news. The bad news is, yes, it existed for centuries. And I think one of the reasons is that it's very inherently manual task. You have to get the people with the domain expertise who can also write the rules. Then you depend on the IT side to write those rules in technical terms. And so it's just hard. And there hasn't been any automation, which brings me to the good news that there is a promise now with all this new AI wave that is happening and the Gen AI and LLMs and more advanced techniques to not totally automate that process, but maybe accelerate it. So there are certain things, and we're looking precisely also on how can we make that data quality activity that nobody wants to do yet everybody needs it desperately. How can we make it easier for the user so that it actually happens? Everybody wants it to happen. It's just there's never enough time for it as much as you would wish, and it's never done, right? So there are certain things that we're looking at, and I think there's great promise there to augment the day-to-day activities that your data engineering is doing to make that faster, make it better, and then get it done. So stay tuned on that. I'm optimistic a little bit.
I like it. Max, anything from you?
No, I'm good. I think Gaston and Anna Maria hit the nail on the head. So
I like it. So tell me, we got a few minutes left, so I'll try and slip in as many questions as I can here. So why do we jump into AI without any idea about data privacy?
One of the points I highlighted repeatedly is that an issue and why AI projects often fail is the availability of data. And the example I used is, suppose you want to use a particular piece of client data to tune or augment an AI model. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're allowed to use it for that purpose. Under GDPR, for example, in Europe, you need to communicate to your customers the purposes that you're going to be using the data for, that you're capturing from them. So if you haven't communicated to them and the customer has not agreed you can use it to tune an AI model for X, then you simply may not use it for that purpose. And this insight is missing in many organizations. And moreover, if you want to, for example, include customer location as part of the tuning data, then you also want to protect the privacy of the individual. So you don't want to feed in full addresses of individuals, that you need to, agree what is an acceptable level that you'll be, tuning the model to improve it without, giving up the privacy of your customer. So, the happy middle might be, we'll only feed in the town, for example, or not the exact street level address.
And if you start with the processes from the beginning, then you have all these little checks. And one of those checks is going to be, we have to do something for data privacy. Mm-hmm. And then you move on to other checks. So if you don't have that, of course, then you jump straight to let's use it, and you miss it, and then you find it later, and then we talked about it.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. So, and I'm just gonna let you all jump in here. If an organization already struggling with data pipelines, how do we ensure that our data processing pipelines for AI models handle increased data loads?
I have a first stab at that. So when I introduced our data integrity suite in one of my slides at the beginning, we kind of highlighted that it's kind of the best of both worlds. So it's a SaaS solution, but it can operate on your data wherever your data resides. So if it resides in a platform that has a processing engine that we can use, like Snowflake, for example, we can execute our quality rules there. If it resides in an ERP system, then we have an on-site agent, which means the data doesn't need to leave the site to have data quality measurements performed on it, for example. And only the results of those measurements get fed back into the cloud for the organization to be able to see. And the way this is engineered essentially is that it's, well, it scales elastically. So yeah, you can add more agents as required, and the SaaS services that we provide are also incorporated our leading practices around elastic scaling.
Yeah. So I love this next question. Can you go more into precisely data quality solution? Can it be standalone or have to be part of a larger suite? And can data quality be incorporated into existing ERP systems?
Yep, absolutely. So on my intro slide, I've mentioned the data integrity suite, offering these 7 interoperable services. And you most certainly don't need to take all of those services. You can pick and choose the most relevant ones. But yeah, there's some capabilities that get shared across the suite. So for example, things like the foundation of the suite has a data catalog. So once that's identified where your data resides, you don't need to specify that again to the quality solution or to the observability solution. It's defined in one place. And in terms of working with an existing ERP solution, yeah, we have connectors for most ERP solutions. And yeah, as I said earlier, the data does not necessarily need to leave your site where the ERP system is to enjoy both the data governance and the data quality and observability benefits that I described in my intro slide.
And just to add on that, think of the suite as a way to address aspects that go across your data journey. So you may start with data quality today because that's your focus, but then we have all those modules and they're interoperable, and you can jump anywhere that you want. So you can start with data quality and then realize, usually what happens a lot of time, you realize you need data governance. They very much go hand in hand. Then you realize that, oh, I have more data sources that I have to bring in. So then you do the integration. And then you realize that, okay, I have all these things in order, but now I need to enrich. To the examples I was giving earlier, my data is not enough. I need to bring in more attributes. Then you go to enrichment, then you do some location. So all these modules are very nicely designed to interoperate with one another so that this whole journey is made easier. And again, to my earlier point, I'm very optimistic that some of these mundane tasks are going to disappear and get a lot of help there.
All right, I love this so much. And then we've got less than 2 minutes. So Max, I'm going to target this next question to you here and just see if we can slip it in under the radar. So it's such an important question. How can we convince enterprise-wide business stakeholders to participate from the very beginning, especially when it's difficult to explain the futuristic outcomes and its value?
Yeah, I think you have to demonstrate what is in it for them. And I'll give you like a very quick example from my own experience here at Precisely. And like any other enterprise, we are looking at leveraging AI tools for our own benefit. And I'm actually part of the value engineering function at Precisely. And one of the cool ideas that I'm actually personally working on right now is using large language models, like for example, ChatGPT and others that are available, to help drive benefits for not just the value engineering team, so people in my team, but also help the account executives that are part of the sales team at Precisely. So when we actually started with this initiative, the goal was to really create a small POC that we could demonstrate the value of. to the account executive and what it could actually do for the entire go-to-market team. And we went with that idea, went with that actually the result of that POC to our chief revenue officer, and he was like so excited to see what the small POC could do and how it could like really transform the journey of an account executive when they're actually going through the whole process of doing account reviews and intelligence and preparing their pitch and so on and so forth. So you start small, show the benefit, show what value it can actually provide to the specific stakeholder. Go with the result. Like, don't go with a grand vision. Go with the result of a small POC or a pilot that you might be able to actually pull off quickly, and then show that, and then go from there.
Oh, that is such a great example and great advice, and just perfect timing, as I'm afraid that is all the time that we have for this particular webinar. Thank you all for this great discussion. I really appreciate it. It's been a really great a panel discussion, and thanks to all of our attendees for being so engaged in everything we do. Again, just a reminder, I will send a follow-up email by end of day Thursday with links to the slides and links to the recording. Thanks you all. Appreciate it so much. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.